Hey, it's Lawrence Sher, cinematographer of The Bride. You're listening to the Cinematography Podcast. Well, the best thing, and this is always exciting for me when I read any script, is that I don't know how the hell we're going to do it, right?
Yeah.
It's like when I read something and I'm like, whoa, this is full of all kinds of big challenges and ideas and techniques, and it feels a bit scary. That's when I get really excited and I really want to do it even more because I don't have all the answers.
Hey, this is Cinepod, the Cinematography Podcast, a program about the art, craft, and philosophy of the moving image presented by our sponsor, Hot Rod Cameras. I'm your host, Ben Rock. Today on our show, I got to speak with cinematographer Lawrence Sher, who's known for the Hangover movies, Joker, and Joker Folie à Deux, and he's also the founder of Shot Deck, which I am a proud subscriber of, the Cinematic Image Database. For this episode, Larry returns to talk about The Bride, and we dive into creating an everything burger of a movie with director Maggie Gyllenhaal using a multitude of techniques and film influences, honoring 1930s filmmaking style by shooting on longer lenses and using real archival footage for the movie within a movie sequences, the challenge of lighting and shooting with practical makeup effects on actors Jessie Buckley and Christian Bale, and finding creative inspiration in projects that scare him. After the interview, stick around for our short ends, our pet obsessions of the week. But first, find out what's going on in the world of entertainment in a little patent-pending segment we like to call Close Focus.
All right, Ben, it is time for our close focus. It's the time we talk about what's going on in the entertainment industry. What's going on right now?
Well, I think we got to talk about the Oscars, and to me, the biggest story and the thing I was probably rooting for the most was an Oscar win for Durald Arkapaw for Sinners. Not just because I love Sinners, and I think Sinners deserve to win the Oscar. Actually, probably above everything else. It had Michael Bauman won for One Battle After Another. I would not have had any of the other DPs who were nominated been one. I wouldn't have been like, Darius Kanji, who's that guy? They were all great. But Durald Arkapaw is the first woman to win and the first woman of color to be nominated. And in 100 years of Academy Awards, no woman has ever won the Academy Award for Best Cinematography. And you say, well, there are fewer women doing it, probably, but probably also not for the last 30 years. I don't know. It's been slowly gaining, and I think there are people who she name checked, like Ellen Kuras, who we've had on the show. If Ellen Kuras had won Best Cinematography or even been nominated for Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, just to name one of several of her amazing films, would anyone have been upset? No. I do think that this has been a weird blind spot of the Academy, and the first woman ever was nominated while you and I have been doing this podcast. Rachel Morrison. We'd interviewed Rachel it was for Mudbound, which is what she was nominated for, but Black Panther hadn't quite come out yet, and she wasn't able to talk about it. But as soon as she got nominated, it was, Alana was like, hurry up and edit that thing. We needed to put it out as quickly as possible because she was the first woman way back in 2018.
Yeah, this is really recent history now, and it's true that cinematography has been sort of a male ghetto for a lot of years. So it was dudes that did this. But
plenty of women have done it over the years, though.
Absolutely. And I was going to say in the last 40 years, in the last 50 years, that has really started to change. And I would say that's accelerating. And there is actually more change happening now than I think at any point ever in the history of that profession. It's like the amount of women who are getting into doing this and getting more opportunities and doing, bigger budget work on a grander scale. It's fantastic.
I hope that move, because we don't, a little behind the scenes look for us. Early in the podcast, we interviewed a woman and we asked her about, how hard it is to be a woman in the industry. And I was our editor back then. And while I was editing, I realized that really wasn't part of her story. And I actually kind of pinged her and said, that's not really your story. And she was like, yeah, it really isn't. And I was like, okay, I'm going to cut it out. And you and I had a chat about it. I think Alana too. And we basically decided we weren't going to make gender a thing that we brought up as a subject. If whoever we're interviewing brings it up, then we'll go down that road with them because that's part of their story. But we're not here to we're not here to point out how difficult anything is, because it's all difficult. All these jobs are very hard for anyone to get. And, when I was interviewing Autumn, I didn't really talk about that stuff regarding her ascent as, being one of the top DPs in the world. But, when I saw that movie, this is just my subjective experience, but like, there are sequences in that movie that give me chills when I think about them now. That movie is so well shot. The cinematography, sound design, music. I mean, you can put the acting, of course, everything you can point to about that movie. To me, that's a movie that I will personally be watching over and over again and referencing, for years and years to come. And I think her work was astonishingly great in it. Specifically, there's that sequence where he's singing the "I Lied to You" song, and it kind of goes through all the music styles.
Incredible.
It's such a perfectly designed sequence and scene. And when it was happening, I'm like, what the hell? Because I came here to see a Ryan Coogler vampire movie. Why am I having like deep moving feelings? And I think it's because Ryan Coogler's, also one of the best directors working today.
There are so many ways that scene could have not worked.
Correct.
So many ways that could not have worked. But to pull it off like that too was just so deft. It was so well done.
So deserved. But also like could we have said it was 2 years ago, I think, when Mandy Walker was nominated for Elvis. Now, Elvis didn't have, I think, the cultural traction that Sinners had, but Mandy Walker had won the ASC award, and Mandy Walker's been doing outstanding work for years and years. And, did she deserve it? I thought she was going to take it that year, and that year, All Quiet on the Western Front, a movie which also like hadn't really registered on most of our radar, that one. And it's not, the cinematography is phenomenal in that movie.
Yeah, not undeserving. Like these wins, it's like you look at them and you're not going like, man, why did this thing win? No, we are spoiled. We have an embarrassment of really well shot, well put together stuff these days.
And we had great movies last year, and like when we spoke with Chanel Riley, it's like Darius Kanji, very overdue, and Marty Supreme looks amazing. And if that had won, you wouldn't be upset about it. I mean, like everyone up there was great, but I really did have that feeling that like Sinners had kind of like a cultural relevance to it. And it was also commercially successful, but it wasn't like an Avengers movie. No offense to Avengers movies, but it was like there was something more and deeper to it. But even honestly, even when Ryan Coogler made Black Panther, he made a superhero movie that had something more meaty and deeper to it, and he kind of took that format and used it to say something, which most people don't need to do. And he didn't do it in an obnoxious, preachy way either. Like I think he's an amazing artist. But I was just very excited for her. And does it make up for the fact that in 100 years of Academy Awards, no woman has ever won before her? No. But I think it's amazing that she won. I hope it opens a lot of doors for her. I hope that we're definitely going to see more work from her. And I look forward to whatever she does, whatever Ryan Coogler does next. I also kind of wanted to bring up that usually horror is the stepchild in the corner at the Academy Awards, with the exception of movies like Silence of the Lambs, which swept. It only had to be one of the best films ever made in order to do that. But this year we had, I would say, like two big winners. One were horror movies, where Weapons, won an Oscar, and Frankenstein won several Oscars, and Sinners won several Oscars. And, to me, those are all on some level horror movies. And granted, they're all like Oscar caliber horror movies. Weapons, I don't think that anyone making Weapons thought that they were going to win Oscars for that. Not because they're not great, but just because it didn't seem like that kind of film. But
horror done at this level is some of the best entertainment you can get. It absolutely is. It's really phenomenal, and I think that also it cracks open the door more to horror films being recognized by the Academy.
Well, yeah. I mean, Weapons is definitely like one of my favorite movies from last year, and one that I revisited. I'm not trying to say it's less than in any way. I'm just saying that like that doesn't seem like a movie that necessarily had Oscar level aspirations, but then they created this incredible character, and then Amy Madigan knocked it out of the freaking park, and I was just so happy to see that happen.
Yeah, it was really great. Well, Ben, I think that we should get to the interview with Lawrence Sher.
All right, let's do it. So congratulations! I went to see it. I went to see the film with a filmmaker friend of mine, and she was blown away. Like she absolutely loved it, and I loved it too. I think it's you don't see kind of these like insane kind of fever dream Bonnie and Clyde, natural born killers kinds of movies very often, and it's pretty impressive work. You know, I mean, I guess just start by telling me like what brought you into the orbit of it. What brought you to Maggie Gyllenhaal?
Yeah, I mean, thank you for the kind words about the film. We really took some big swings, and
Yep.
and I appreciate the sentiment because I know at every step we tried to sort of just take it into the direction that felt the most free and creative, and sort of exploring that part of the filmmaking process, which I so loved. I was recommended by our producer on The Bride, Emma Costco, when she produced both Jokers, and so I knew her for years.
Mm-hmm.
She was involved with the project before I was, and she recommended me to Maggie. That was pretty much the first step, and it was around the time we were finishing up Folie à Deux that I had my first Zoom with Maggie, and then we had some subsequent Zooms until I was grateful enough that she hired me.
It's such an everything burger of a movie. There's like so much going on in it. And so I'm really curious, like when you read the script, like what was your first impression of how one would go about turning that into a movie?
Well, the best thing, and this is always exciting for me when I read any script, is that I don't know how the hell we're going to do it, right?
Yeah.
It's like when I read something and I'm like, whoa, this is full of all kinds of big challenges and ideas and techniques, and it feels a bit scary. That's when I get really excited, and I really want to do it even more because I don't have all the answers. It starts with reading that script and thinking, oh, well, okay, it's a period piece. It's part of Frankenstein mythology. So how are we going to deal with that? It's got this sort of ghost of Mary Shelley and Ida, and then becomes the bride. It's got a reinvigoration, which is always like, okay, we've seen that before. How are we going to do it differently? And then it has just like a genre, which I've always appreciated, which is this kind of like outlaw romance.
Yeah.
So it had all these things that I was really intrigued with and scared by. And so it just starts with that process of getting inside of Maggie's head, who obviously had written it and had lived it, in her own head for so long, to sort of get a feel for like, what's the tone of this film that we're going to go for. And really that process just starts, and we just keep plugging away from the first conversation all the way through, making the film. We're constantly having those conversations, and we're learning the filmmaking language as we're doing it as well, besides all the things we do in prep. And Maggie and I really enjoyed sitting down and going through the script page by page, going through scene by scene. And that was some of the most fun experiences. And of course, when you're doing that, you're doing it theoretically. You're doing it first just based on nothing, not even locations or set builds. Then you're seeing locations, and you can start to conceive it based on those specific locations. But it's all theoretical until you get those actors in front of the lens. And then it keeps evolving. So the ideas stay, and the big ideas stay, but the specifics kind of are constantly evolving as we make it.
So like, what kind of visual language did you land on? Like what were the lenses? What were the colors? What were the lighting approaches that you felt kind of, became part of the palette of how you told the story?
Yeah. I mean, from a lens standpoint, I think over the course of watching films and thinking about movies like Thelma and Louise or True Romance or films like that, I think we started moving, and even with the sort of choice to shoot anamorphic, we shot it for IMAX, so we shot anamorphic for all the 239 footage, and then we shot spherical, where we protected for expanding to.
That's how I saw it. I saw it in IMAX.
Yeah, so you saw it the best way, and I think we just kept gravitating to a little bit longer and longer lenses, which has a little bit of a resurgence, in the sense of widescreen anamorphic and widescreen long lens photography. You see it in Marty Supreme, you see it in One Battle After Another. Obviously, those films were being made at the same time we were, so we weren't influenced by them. But I think I always appreciated those sort of, with Ridley Scott, Tony Scott, kind of longer lens, and that the sort of, it almost now feels a bit like an older style. And Maggie really appreciated it too. And as we started doing testing and photographing and going, okay, what's that lens? That's a sort of a closer, wider lens. That's a closer medium lens. As we pulled back and got a little bit longer, I think it just was an emotional reaction by Maggie that she kept responding to that. So we kept, I think, looking more and more towards a bit of a longer lens style throughout the movie. It also presented itself based on certain situations, early days with Ida, there's some more closer stuff. There's some intimate moments between, Euphronius and Frank that are sort of on a little bit more of the medium wider lens. But as they get on the run and it becomes a little bit more of that sort of Bonnie and Clyde thing, I think we start progressing into a little bit longer lensing, which allows us to get the camera a little bit away from the actors and almost see it from a little bit more of a perspective further away, which allows the intimacy to have a different psychological effect than sort of being so physically close and right in their faces. From a lighting standpoint, I think when I started, I thought, let me adhere to some of the rules of the time in which this movie takes place, which is pretty limited, right? It's like 1930s. You're dealing with effectively tungsten light, right?
Arc lights and stuff.
You're dealing with just like daylight. At night, you have a very sort of limited color palette of warmth from the street lights and from other lights. But what was really nice about Maggie's approach, and when this happened through prep, was as we approached certain scenes, whether it's like the club that they go to at night where all the outcasts are, we kept sort of just going, well, what's a club experience? What's like an experience we want emotionally? And if we just release ourselves from the constraints of the time, and it was like, okay, well, we could have colored light in there and we could have strobes. And then I went and sort of did some research just so I could like defend it and be like, all right, when was the fluorescent invented? When was it being used? And yeah, there were fluorescents at the time and there were certainly strobes, not used in the sort of club technique, but that was me holding on to this kind of like desire to be true to the time. But I really appreciated, and that continued throughout, even with like the dance scene that happens in Putting on the Ritz when they're in this really, austere ballroom, to break into sort of theatrical lighting that sort of sweeps in and makes a move and goes to this sort of blue theatrical lighting and all the house lights go off. That is just full fantasy. And then it's like, let's forget this idea that the 30s and let's just go into whatever emotionally we want the lighting to do and not be sort of constrained by those. And I thought that made all the difference for the film because it allowed us to kind of make a movie that was both in the 30s, in the 80s, and today. Yeah.
It does kind of feel like it lives in every time period.
Exactly. And I think that's one of the things I really like at what we did, even if it feels, like you say, a bit of a everything burger.
That's not a complaint. That's not a complaint. Yeah. I mean,
no. I mean, I think it's like Vernon Wiles are sort of a throwback to the sort of 40s detectives and in their sort of scenes, particularly when they converge on Ida or Bride, and he knows her as Ida. It's very Third Man, and it's like we obviously sort of we're. I
was wondering about that.
Those characters.
It did feel kind of Third Man.
Yeah, exactly. With the silhouettes and the shadows and kind of the hard light.
Yeah.
So yeah, we because it's also a movie about movies. Frank's whole, like the thing that calms his nervous system is to go and escape into movies where he can disappear and not be a monster, right? He can sort of hide himself and be just and disappear into the film. So it also is a love story to movies.
Oh, I hadn't really thought about it, but that does make sense. And when you were doing kind of the movie within a movie stuff, you're doing kind of a Fred Astaire kind of a homage, or, like, I don't know if there was a specific dancer that you were going after with the Jake Gyllenhaal character, but like, what movies did you reference or study to kind of get that style? Because that's a whole different style of lighting, and it looked extremely authentic to the period, I think.
Well, we started with like those actual films that we sliced moments out of, and then dropped Frank and Jake's character into Ronnie Reed into those films. And they were like Broadway Melody of 1936 and 1940, Gold Diggers of 1933, Dames 1931. So there were films of the time, that the film takes place. And those were really the ones that had these sort of set pieces. I remember even ones we didn't end up using. Like there's one in which like these two people dance on piano keys, and it's a big set, or, the little girls inside the champagne glasses and dancing inside the champagne bubbles. And I think the more sort of, out there those moments were the ones we were sort of influenced by, as opposed to maybe the films of the 40s. It was those really early 30s dance musicals that I think we were influenced by. And those were super fun. Those were some of the earliest things we did, where those things where we went black and white and dropped them into those, which is always fun, because it's like reverse engineering how to sort of seamlessly drop Frank into what is effectively, actors from the 1930s, and we're just basically, mimicking we had the wide shots from the movie, and then we cut in closer, and now we're sort of replicating it in our time.
And I have to admit, I'm an ignoramus, and I didn't realize that you were using real old movies in that. I thought that was entirely a creation of you guys.
Basically just the close-ups, or when we would like sort of do on a spin, it'd be like a big wide shot, and then on the spin we'd cut in closer, and it'd be Jake and Julianne.
So did you use green screen, or did you recreate small pieces of the set, or how did you
small pieces of the set in addition to blue screen behind it and green screen behind it, just to drop them in later? Yes, exactly. Like some sets, like the one where it's like it's an oxymoron when Ronnie Reed and Julianne are sort of like he's holding a plant. Now the reference of that was from a bigger scene from another movie where in the background there's like a wall with a plant. So we just sort of said, oh, well, what if this little section took place at that wall, and we built that whole wall ourselves? Or when Jake is like making breakfast and dancing around the little kitchen, that's a standalone set that we didn't have to cut into. But the bigger sets pieces, and Frank dancing by himself, and all the wide shots and him in the middle of a bunch of girls, the bunch of girls and all that is 100% from another movie.
Wow.
And we're just dropping Frank in like Forrest Gump style.
Oh, that's cool. It's so cool because, I mean, like Forrest Gump, back in the day, that was like such a new thing to do. And now it's done so casually, like, not, I say casually, easy for me to say, but like it's done in such a way that like I didn't even notice. I own my own illiteracy here, but I didn't realize. I just thought you guys had created it from scratch, and that it looked super authentic to the period. Now, did you have to use like different lenses or anything like that or
our lenses were already like, we had these Hasselblads that were already moved, like lenses that were very old and already had like characteristics of that time. I think what I did was I went to a place of like trying to go with a deeper f-stop, a deeper, more depth of field, because just at that time, the idea of shooting in shallow depth of field like we do today wasn't really a thing. So I tried to adhere to some of the rules of the photography from that time, but even also we'd shoot with two cameras and get them, as close as possible to do that sort of on-axis cutting that was very of the time that you see in Frank Capra and other films like that. And so we tried to sort of adhere, and even the sort of the lack of camera movement, or when they did do camera moves, were they cranes that pulled back as opposed to, zooms or things like that became like an older style technique. So tried to sort of stick to the rules of the game from those movies. And then really just looked at a lot of times we're not going from camera negative on these films either. We're going from like a Blu-ray, which is the best quality that's out there. And so I'm looking at the degradation of whatever and trying to match to whatever the source material that we had. And so whether that's contrast and obviously it's black and white. So it's really just contrast ratios of both the lighting and where the blacks and whites are. to have both those, have Jake and Julianne and all these incredible choreographers do some of these little dancing things were great. And to see Christian dance and really have fun with that little scene when he sees himself in the background, kind of like trying to fit in with the other dancers is one of my favorite little moments. It's so endearing to see Frankenstein.
When that happened, I actually had the thought of like they should do Putting on the Ritz, and then later you do Putting on the Ritz.
Well,
I was like,
you're right, because that is very much in the sort of like, it feels like the tone of Frankenstein in Young Frankenstein, because he's sort of sweet, and that's how Frank is. Frank is actually not a violent person. Violence sort of is inside of him, but it's not his nature.
Yeah. I wanted to talk about the makeup, and I have to, before I even get into it, I want to, full disclosure, Jason Collins of Autonomous Effects is a really good friend of mine. And he's been telling me about The Bride, since you guys were shooting it. But, a lot of times, you'll have a makeup effect that's on screen here or there or whatever. But like in this movie, you've got the two leads basically are covered in makeup effects. Yeah. And what are the challenges that come with that? And I'm wondering about even like, are you worried about seeing seams, materials, whatever?
So many of those things, all of it. Like the first thing we did the minute I got hired was within probably weeks, we had the first pass of makeup in LA looking at Christian. And that went on for many, many weeks because of course, that we didn't want to do anything with VFX. We didn't want to do anything that was sort of going to be added later. And so the idea is all those things are the absolute fear, is that you're seeing where the hair meets the, and what parts of it. And there's so many individual pieces, including how the neck sort of exposes. And then he's also in certain scenes, the one with Euphronius and later in some of the scenes when they're making love. And he's like, there are many scenes, even when he's getting pennies in Washington Square Park at the fountain, he's has nothing on. And all those scarring, it's just like an intense amount of makeup. Even on his normal day when it's just basically from the neck up, it's 5 hours of makeup. And then you have to factor that into your shooting day.
Of course.
Right? That 5 hours not only sort of limits each day of shooting, which is fine, but think about what then it puts on Christian every day. And then obviously Jessie had a couple hours herself every day. But that part of where Christian is sitting, literally for 5 or 6 hours a day in and out of the makeup chair is on top of obviously having to perform. But that part of really nailing the makeup was probably the most arduous part of prep and the most important part, because we really wanted to make sure he felt both monstrous, but always it felt like Christian.
Yeah, I mean, and I feel like that's another thing. It's like if you didn't have someone who was as big a star as Christian Bale, maybe you wouldn't worry about it, but you want to be able to see Christian Bale in the performance, right?
You want to just see those eyes, and you want to make sure you're not losing everything that makes him a great actor behind something that separates the intimacy and the experience emotionally from the audience, because they can't sort of see through a mask or we don't want obviously anyone to be thinking that it's a mask ever.
Yeah.
And it's really incredible, the artists that did the makeup on this film. And I remember because we watched some of her, Maggie and I watched Vice, and we sort of were looking at, what he did to become Dick Cheney, and just like the ways in which, before Christian has had to transform with makeup, and that was one of the more recent ones, just to get a feel for, how we see through that to still see him.
Were there any like specific lessons you learned about like how to shoot so that you don't see the seams, or so that the makeup sells better? Obviously without giving up your overall plan.
No, I mean, exactly. Try not to like let that drive it. But there was a lot of like early days in the shooting of Frank, and not just in the shooting, but in like our sort of introduction to Frank, that intentionally, both emotionally and for the story, he's kept more in the shadows, right? So if you think about when he meets Euphronius, he's sitting in a darkened corner of a set with a bunch of bright lights behind it, so that bright light's front lighting Annette Bening's character, but he's intentionally sort of in the shadows. Even inside, there's a big window that he's being sort of examined by her, and he's, it's obviously very backlit. And then when he sits down, he's still in the backlight of that. So partly it's to just keep him a bit more in the shadows, both because that's sort of how he lives in the shadows, and so that felt emotionally for what his character is doing. And only later, when we're sort of progressing with him in the story, does he get more light. But generally speaking, the makeup was so good, I never felt like there was a time that I can remember where I lit something and then thought, oh shit, I'm really seeing something bad here. I mean, that was specific to the lighting. I think I was able to sort of light the scene with the intention of what I wanted to be, and not really be too worried that it was going to expose makeup.
I'm going to tell Jason you said that. It's going to make him very happy.
Yeah, no, it's amazing what they did. Yeah, they were fantastic.
He loved working with you too. He said that you were great to work with. I'm
so impressed with what they're able to do, because I didn't know much about that sort of heavy, prosthetics and stuff like that. And the fact that it like was in pieces, and like the idea that, you could do a full mask, but then you're actually doing these individual pieces that are all being put on separately, and then you could literally be inches away and not see the seams, to me is a magic trick in and of itself.
You brought up something just now too that kind of made me think about an interview I read with you on IndieWire about this, where you were talking about like Jessie Buckley's character kind of stayed out of the light, and it was specifically you were talking about the scene that you shot in the empty pool, but that basically wherever you put bright light, they would move away from. And I don't know if that was one of the rules or if
no. I think it was like that in that scene, which is one of my favorite scenes in the movie, is that they're hiding away in this sort of empty pool to stay out of the daylight, so they can sort of not be caught, and they're now fully on the run. They've just killed two people now. She killed train, sort of person from the train that's trying to catch her, and policeman, and he's killed a couple guys in the club scene. And we had these windows, and it was like, well, let's just have the sense of like early morning daylight shafting in there. And then it was really on Jessie, because she's sitting up top, and I was able to sort of light a section of that, but her path and where she goes in the second half of that scene is really on her. And I thought she did an incredible job of using the light to sort of allow it to sort of like enhance the scene and the performance. And that little shot where she comes into the side light at the end, and she's sort of melancholy and sort of thinking about her name and other things that. And I love that close up as much as anything in the whole movie, in that kind of side light with her blonde hair, her bright white hair, and the sort of contrast of that bouncing off that pool wall. I felt like it wasn't where I asked her to stand in that light. She just sort of found it in a beautiful way.
Oh, that's cool. That's really cool. I was kind of wondering, and I guess the answer is probably no, but like I think about like the old Frankenstein movies, the James Whale ones, where like they're afraid of fire, and I was wondering if you
were like afraid of light like that.
Yeah.
That wasn't the thing. But it's funny. There's one shot, but it's so subliminal. There were a couple times where we did want to sort of like, there's those two really low angle shots in the James Whale, where it's like really starkly sort of 3/4 low up on her, and she's like looking monstrous. If you look in the scene when she's kind of being attacked in the strobe lighting, there's like a couple shots in there that we tried to sort of just like subliminally sort of pay homage to those images. And even there's a shot when she first gets reinvigorated, which that reinvigoration scene has like one of my favorite shots we have in the whole movie, which is because what we really wanted to do is think, well, okay, how do we sort of like drive all that light? Is it lightning from somewhere else? Like in the old and, many, many versions of Frankenstein where they're harnessing electricity and lightning, I watched a couple of them just to understand kind of the history of Frankenstein in movies. But for our version, there's a shot in Persona in which like this subliminal little shot at the beginning of the movie where there's this carbon art kind of like, jar, which is the brightest light that they would use back in the time to light movies, and even it could light a projector bulb so it could shine for movies, so it has this double meaning. And so that was the idea of that we were going to harness all this energy. It was going to draw to one point, and then these two arcs were going to sort of join, and that would be the explosive energy that would reinvigorate, Dead Ida into the Bride. But there's a shot that happens after that where she sort of wails back like this, and then this was one of the sort of challenging things that we kept trying to figure out, which is like, well, what would it feel like if it was almost like a Polaroid, where you go from just like a white Polaroid and you start to feel an image come from underneath it. And that was the inspiration behind that shot that comes, and it's just a white screen. So the blast of electricity comes, whites out the screen, and then from within the white screen, you slowly just start to see like shapes that you're not even sure. It's a very abstract image of just a nose and a little bit of a mouth coming out from within. It almost looks like she's underneath like cloth. And we shot that with a Phantom at like 1,000 frames per second.
Nice.
And then basically blasted her with so much light that it was like overexposed to pure whiteness. And then the decay of the light coming back down produced the sort of beginnings of like seeing an image, almost like what would happen if you just blasted somebody in the eyes. Their pupils would dilate so close that they wouldn't see anything. Everything would go dark. And then slowly your pupils would open up and you'd start to see things again. But instead of going to black, we were like, well, what if it came out of white? And then that came to like, okay, what's this idea of maybe a Polaroid coming in? And that shot I quite love in the film, and the way it turned out and the way it sits in the movie.
That's cool. I want, every time I interview someone, I'm like, I got to go see the movie again now because I feel like I walk away with so much more understanding of what the thought process was. But it's like, such a feast of visual. Like, I guess, when you're handed a script like this, is it just like, oh my God, what a gift. I get to do all kinds of like this is not the huge. This isn't, even
it's
something
exactly
like Joker, which is pretty expressionistic. Like, I feel like this goes even further.
For sure. And I think that's precisely what happens when I take on any project. Is I start with like, oh, okay, there's a scene in a kitchen, in a breakfast in the morning. Okay, well, all right, fine. I sort of knock off the scenes where I'm like, okay, that one I don't have to sort of worry about. That's going to be driven by the location or the set, or I know how we can attack that. And then there's like a handful of things, maybe 6 or 7, sometimes 10 things throughout a movie, where I'm like, I don't know how the hell we're going to do that. I know what I want it to feel like, right? Like the chase through the woods at night. Like, I know I don't want there's no lighting. I don't want to sit and put a bunch of like lights in the sky and make it feel like moonlight. No, I want it to feel like, what if this was like 1930 and they were chasing through woods and it was only headlights that could light the scene, right? Like, that's what I want it to feel like. Okay, how are we going to do that? Or like, oh, I want the drive-in movie theater in the middle of a field to feel like the only light that's really lighting the scene is the drive-in movie, screen. Okay, how the hell are we going to do that? And then it goes through like many, many meetings of like, first idea. Okay, could we throw light onto a white screen and bounce it back like it would be in real life? That's not enough light. Okay, could we set up a huge silk and light through it from behind? Okay, how big would that have to be? Oh, it's 60 feet. Okay, what's behind it? What are those lights? And then it's sort of, going down the road, you just keep finding sort of plan A, B, C, until what we did was we just basically had a big LED screen, because it allowed us the most control to like both look towards the screen and bring it down to a value, or put the sort of the movie footage on it so they knew what they were sort of, reacting to. But it also gave us the ability, when we weren't seeing it, to be able to pump light from it at the intensity that would light all the way to the back of the cars where Frank and the bride were having conversation inside. So that's a many, many week process of trying to figure out those solutions. And that goes through, 10 scenes in this movie, in which it's like, the reinvigoration being one, or, you name it, right? It's like both, once you start location scouting, once you start thinking about sets, those are the things that are like the most fun part about making movies. It's like all that kind of like, I don't know how to do this. I mean, and like you start talking with your collaborators, your key grip and your gaffer, and, and you start, thinking about it. But it's the best when you don't know how to do it.
Mm-hmm. And why is that? I mean, like what?
Well, because that's like what makes each movie fun is like trying something that you don't entirely know. Like if you just went back to the well every single time, and you have to sometimes just go to the well, particularly since you don't have necessarily like the ability to sort of fail during the day.
Yeah.
You know, you can fail throughout the day a little bit, but you have to kind of recover in real time because you just can't not have a plan B if like you go, I want to try this. Oh shit, it's not working. At some point you have to know that while you're doing it. But you kind of want to be on the edge of feeling like, is this going to work? Or is this, you know, whatever it is, you want to feel like you're doing something that feels new and a little bit scary. And so if there's a movie that feels like, I've done this before, I know every step of this movie, I could do it in my sleep, I'm usually not interested in that movie at all. It's usually the thing that I'm like the one movie that scares me the most, only because it feels like I would pull my hair out, is like a movie that all took place in one location.
Yeah.
And yet, that's probably the movie I should do because it scares me so much. But it scares me in a way that I feel like I'm gonna be like so bored that every day I'm gonna want to like change everything.
There's a really interesting one in theaters right now called Undertone, and it literally never leaves the same house. It's in the house.
I've seen those things, and I'm like, I'm always impressed. Yeah. I'm always impressed with what they're able to do, and yet those movies scare me. And I've read them, and I'm always like, ugh.
It was also like
I don't know why. I don't know why it scares me. Like
Soderbergh's The Presence too, which like that was extremely confined. Even though it's a big house with a lot of different looks in it. I mean it's an interesting challenge. I don't know. I mean I think that it's always interesting to see when a filmmaker conscientiously takes away their toys, takes away their bag of tricks and says, okay, what do I got? I mean Dogma 95 maybe being the most obvious example of that, but there's even like when Spielberg makes Schindler's List and says, I'm not going to have a single crane shot and I'm not going to storyboard anything, and doesn't do all the stuff that he does.
Sure.
I mean, it is interesting because you've done so much work, so much amazing work over the years for so long that it is a question like, how do you keep it fresh for yourself? How do you keep yourself creatively engaged in it? Because you probably, I mean, there's a lot of people in any business, not just this business, who like they figure out how to do what they do and then it's a flywheel. They just keep doing it. And I'm sure that there are plenty of DPs out there who it's like they're good at doing whatever it is and they just keep on trucking. They just, bang them out. And there's always something new, but like, it's interesting to hear how you want to kind of keep it fresh for yourself.
Yeah. I mean, the good thing is every movie is inherently never the same because you're dealing with new actors and you're dealing with, a brand new script and all that. So it's never even, but in terms of making those choices, it does come down to kind of the material. What's interesting about it is it could just be like a brand new place in the world that it shoots. It could be a new actor that it has in and a director, of course. There's all kinds of reasons, but I definitely know for each time I want to feel stimulated and a little bit scared and not necessarily be in ground that I've been in before. So that usually is part of the criteria of saying yes. And this movie, The Bride, had all of it. It had an incredible director who had an incredible vision and is super talented. And then it obviously had actors like Jessie and Christian and of course all the rest of the cast, Peter and Penelope and Annette. So this movie was like had everything in spades that I was looking for in terms of like a project to sink my teeth into.
I did kind of want to hit on the influences of it because it is, like you said, it is a little bit about other films of the time, and a lot of people have compared it to Bonnie and Clyde, and I see that. And as I was watching it, I was thinking about Badlands. I was thinking about True Romance, which I was glad to hear you mention. I was thinking, and Natural Born Killers kept popping into my head just because Natural Born Killers kind of has that like. I mean, it's almost multimedia, but it just feels like any technique could find a place in that movie.
Right. And, I mean, that's like when Richardson and Stone were like throwing every single thing at it. Like, you name it, Super 8,
Yeah.
3516, VHS, whatever they could do. We didn't look at Natural Born Killers really at all. I think maybe we one time sort of threw it in and looked a little bit, but certainly True Romance was a conversation piece. Bonnie and Clyde, Thelma and Louise, Wild at Heart was a
Love
conversation
it.
piece
Yeah,
for sure. Like even like at the end when he's sort of in the car and it's like or no in what's the other David Lynch film that with that he's like driving like mad,
Lost Highway.
sort of like Lost Highway, that
Yeah.
craziness at the end of Lost Highway.
Yeah.
Right? And so the sort of David Lynch fever dream sort of aspect of the way he makes films.
I can see
and
that.
And the way in which he's like basically subverting genres, right? Like sometimes I look at a David Lynch film and I'm like, what is this genre? It's like maybe it's like Wild at Heart's great because it really is a romance, but it's also like weird and thriller and sort of a horror movie at times. And it's just like, and I think that is part of the DNA of this film as well.
What about like the Mary Shelley stuff? Because that feels like it's almost in its own separate movie. That we keep kind of coming back to it. It's black and white, but it also reminds me of almost like Guy Madden, the Canadian filmmaker who makes old looking movies.
Yeah, we tried a bunch of things. We tried things that aren't even in the movie in terms of like looking at the ways in which, the bride and, and Ida and Shelley would talk to each other, and the bride and Shelley. And we even did some cool things with like an old hand cranked 35 millimeter camera in which we tried double exposure and just like literally cranking it back to reverse, which is really an exact science because you're like sort of counting the number of turns. So you're cranking it forward and then you're like going, okay, put now Mary Shelley in, you're cranking it back and you're trying it again.
Full on double exposure.
It was full on double exposure. And it was great because then I was sort of like turning lights on and off. So depending on where we were, we would sort of just like expose that person out of blackness and then turn them back off and this sort of like catch can kind of experimentation. And we tried sort of like misaligning the gate and the shutter so that it would streak. We were sort of early days of prep. We were looking at all kinds of techniques. And at the end of the day, I think the technique we found was just this idea of in a void, being able to turn lights off and on to kind of like in the beginning of the movie when Mary Shelley sort of introduces the movie, we're kind of like, in a void, turning a light on, turning it off, turning it on from different sides of like from left key, right key, frontal, backlight. And within that thing, when the light goes off and the next light comes on, whatever Jessie's doing in between sort of skips time within the frame, which I think was where we landed as far as it feeling a bit like she was lost in a purgatory and speaking from another, from beyond. And I think that's where we landed. But we spent a lot of time really playing with the even that bell jar that she's stuck inside of.
It's so cool.
And like, how do we light that? Like if you light it too frontal, then the bright light of the thing is in the shot. So you had to find this like very specific angle where the bell jar top wouldn't reflect into the shot.
That's cool.
Yeah, it was very, very fun working with all that Mary Shelley stuff and with Jessie.
Before we go, firstly, I'd like to encourage anyone listening to this to definitely go check out The Bride. Definitely go see it in theaters. It's freaking awesome. And it stars our Best Actress winner, Jessie Buckley.
That's
so
right.
let's go. But do you have a website? I know that you have Shot Deck. If there's anything you want to plug, send people to where.
Yeah, I think Shot Deck, for anybody who's watching this podcast, you'd probably be into Shot Deck, which is it's just a massive database of image references from movies that's good for inspiration and reference and research and
pitch decks. Holy crap, pitch decks!
Yeah, you name pitch
decks. I used it for
also,
a pitch deck 2 weeks ago.
Absolutely, pitch decks, but also just for conversation starters. Like Maggie and I, every time we would talk about a scene, every time we would sit and go through and create a shot list, we were constantly going, well, what is that shot from Lost Highway? What is that shot from, what was it about True Romance that we liked? Oh, it was like the conversation started to go, well, Tony Scott in the Ridley Scott method is like a very long lens shot. Oh, what does that look like? What does that feel like to us? And do we like that? Do we not like that? It's like a great, piece of inspiration. It's the first place I go when I start any movie. and it continues all the way through post-production. So, check it out, shottech.com, and it's like, please go see The Bride. See it in the theaters if you can, because it's made for that. That's for sure.
No, it's quite a ride in IMAX. I saw it at the Sherman Oaks Galleria on their brand new IMAX screen.
Well, I'm in LA because I was in Sydney and traveling around for the last 2 weeks, and so I'm gonna see it tonight in Universal City, which is where it can expand all the way to 143, which is only 40 screens.
I know that's like the only real. I'm ashamed of my hometown, but it's like the only real IMAX screen.
There are only 40 in the world, so it's like we're lucky to have one in Los Angeles. But it's like so I'm going to see it in that, because outside of color timing and seeing it down in Playa, which is where we like the IMAX headquarters. This will be my first chance to see it in that big. So
well, cool. Thank you so much for coming back on the show.
Man. Thank you.
All right, so that was Lawrence Sher. Lawrence, of course, thanks so much for coming on the show. I can't wait to have you back on the show to talk about your next big movie.
Always great. One of the best.
Ben, it is our short end time of the show. It's the time we talk about pet obsessions. What's your pet obsession this week?
There is a movie that is currently playing in theaters that I went to see, and it's not going to be everybody's cup of tea, but it's called Undertone, and it's a horror movie about a podcaster. And it's basically a podcaster, a woman who's a podcaster, and she co-hosts a podcast where she and her co-host, who is never in the same room with her in the whole movie, look into unexplained phenomenon, and she's the skeptic. And I kind of felt like, okay, I know where this is going, and I was wrong. And and also I should say, in the same house, her mother is at like hospice level sick, and she's taking care of her mother, and she's in a bed unconscious basically the whole movie. These are the only two people you're going to see on screen. So this, I heard, I read, was a $500,000 production. And I saw it on a big screen, and it really looks great. The DP we've never had on the show, but it's somebody named Graham Beasley. And this movie is a perfect example of the kind of movie that that uses all of its resources perfectly, and uses the things that would cripple other productions with low budgets. They use it to great effect, because there are more characters than just her and her mom, but they choose to kind of only show us those two characters. And there's even there are dialogue scenes where I'm like, why am I not seeing that person on screen? And it's a style choice that's really good, but it's a movie also that like uses composition and framing and camera movement and sound design. The sound design is so good. And I feel like for a movie that definitely had relatively limited resources, they use every friggin' paint in the paint can, in the paint bucket, whatever, in whatever receptacle they use for paint. They do it really, really well. And it's genuinely spooky and atmospheric, and it's kind of a slow burn, which is not always my favorite kind of horror movie, but it does it really well. And it does it even with framing by like short-siding the frame and having like the room behind her dominate the frame, but it's completely dark, and so you start finding your eye looking for like what is in the dark all the time. It's just a solid movie, and it's playing in theaters right now. I should mention the writer-director, Ian Tuason, Tuason. Hope I didn't butcher your name, Ian. But really solid work, and I hope more people go catch it in the theater. If you're looking for something to go see in the theater, obviously this week Project Hail Mary comes out, so that's probably going to dominate theatrical, but I highly recommend this. Check it out.
That sounds awesome, Ben. This sounds super cool.
I sure hope so. How about yourself, Ilya? What you got?
Well, I have a tendency to do this sometimes in my short ends, which is to look forward to the future. And I don't know if you and I have ever talked about this, but there's a lot of people who have superhero fatigue, and I completely understand why. But have you and I ever discussed what my favorite superhero movie of all time is?
Never, but let me guess. I'm gonna go with Flesh Gordon.
Never seen it, but
okay. I'm gonna go with the Roger Corman Fantastic Four.
No, never saw that either. So sorry. I appreciate you thinking my tastes move towards these very indie, esoteric, and potentially X-rated projects, but no. Care to offer one final guess, or you want me just to tell you?
Let me go. Okay, hold on. The Dolph Lundgren Punisher.
Wow. No, again, it's the original Incredibles. I think the Incredibles,
Oh yeah.
technically my favorite superhero movie of all time. And so I was quite pleased when on a shareholder call, Disney announced, I believe today, that Incredibles 3 will be coming out. And I only have to wait until the summer of 2028.
Oh my God.
It is clearly in production right now. If they're giving it a release date, June 16th, 2028, I know where I will be. I will be seeing Incredibles 3, which is the first one not directed by Brad Bird. It's actually going to be directed by Peter Sohn. He directed Elemental and received an Academy Award nomination for that. But I'm pretty excited. I'm sure they're getting the band back together. Craig T. Nelson, Holly Hunter, Sam Jackson, all these incredible, actors who lent their voices to the Incredibles franchise of two movies so far. I think
The original Jack is not available because he's running for Senate.
well, it's been a few years.
Yeah. That was my whole joke. Go on.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, but this is exciting for me. So hey, for those of you who had not yet heard the news, Pixar is going to release another Incredibles movie, and if it is based anything like the first two, it should be really fantastic.
Yeah, I mean it's Pixar, and I feel like Pixar is on an upswing. They kind of had a little dip for a minute, and I feel like they're coming back.
The first movie made 650 million, so very successful. The second one made like 1.3 billion, so
Yikes.
I'm sure they have pretty high expectations for.
Well, I know that they had a little bit of a lull in theatrical, although things like Inside Out 2 did really well. But there were a couple of movies like I'm not going to name them, but
You got a movie out right now too. So
oh yeah, Hoppers. I took my son to see it. Hoppers is enormously fun.
great. Yeah, maybe I'll check it out soon.
Oh God, yeah.
Toy Story 5 is coming out. I mean, they're really like,
When you make so much high quality stuff, I'll cut you some slack if a few of your movies don't exactly hit exactly. But honestly, I think that a lot of people are complaining about their financial performance starting with COVID and movies like Luca. And my son was Luca 2 Halloweens in a row. He loves Luca, and honestly, I think Luca is a great film.
it is a great film.
They have they get me almost every time where I'm like, how are they manipulating my emotions so effectively here? I just never know.
They're pretty much a force of nature. It's great to watch their stuff. Anyway, Ben, that is going to do it for the show. Where can people find you if they want to reach out?
Please find me at benrock.com. That's where you'll find all of your Ben Rock information. I'm also on LinkedIn. A bunch of people from here have added me on there. I will add you back as long as you're not weird. And, all the other expected places. How about yourself, Ilya? Where can people find you?
Ben, be honest. You might even add someone who's a little weird.
A little weird is okay. I would say don't be overly familiar. That's just always a good thing if you don't personally know somebody. Anyway.
Agreed. You can find me at Hot Rod Cameras right now, hotrodcameras.com. And of course, LinkedIn and Instagram, you can find me. I am Ilya Friedman at those places, and you can find me there. So, Ben, who do we have to thank? Who made this show possible?
The one-man band of Alana Cody, producing and editing. Prediting?
Yes, yeah.
Prediting. We have to thank her for lining up all these amazing interviews, including Lawrence Sher, who, I always learn something when I talk to Lawrence, by the way. It's just freaking
Smart guy.
Brilliant guy. Brilliant guy. And then also we have to thank Kays Alatraxi, who composed all of the music that you heard on the show. You can check out Kays' website, musicbykays.com. Also check out Kays Fixin' Synthesizers on YouTube at Kays Labs.
I will absolutely do that. I can't wait to see what he's fixing this week.
Yeah. Be interesting to see.
All right, Ben, that's the end of the show. I'll take us out. Thanks for tuning in.
All right. This has been Cinepod, the cinematography podcast presented by Hot Rod Cameras. Find your next camera, lens, or accessory at hotrodcameras.com. Watch and subscribe to our show on YouTube or listen on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Follow and interact with us on Instagram, Threads, Facebook, Blue Sky, and LinkedIn. But not X. Don't do that. Thanks for tuning in.